Welcome to Eye on the Illini. This is Mike Cagley here with Matt Stevens. We're going to talk a little bit about Illinois athletics state of the nation. That was a presentation that Josh Whitman gives to the Illini media. He does it every year, the last week of June, and it's a fantastic event to go to. I was unable to attend this year for the first time in IlliniGuys history that I didn't make it up for that, which is disappointing because that meant I didn't get it Papa Del's, I didn't get a Lil Porgies, and I didn't get monocles. So that was a sad few days here down in Texas. But I got a couple things. First off, Matt, I don't care what anybody says. We try to call it the way we see it. And I got to think that when Josh Whitman is sitting in his office, knowing that he's hired Brett Bielema, Brad Underwood, and Shauna Green, he's got to feel like he's on a pretty good roll. Now, I don't think he's the type of guy who's going to walk around with number one signs and that type of thing. But you have to think from a success standpoint, this is probably as high as Illini sports have been across the board, possibly in my lifetime. They're certainly rivaling what we saw with White and Henson.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think you could go to Mike White, you could go to John Makovic, and Lou was still there, but women's basketball wasn't what it should have been. And so if you're going to go to the trio, yeah, I mean, they have the trios championship right now.
And if volleyball was going,
yeah,
if volleyball was going, holy cow, they'd be cooking even hotter right now because you see what like Nebraska does with volleyball. They make unbelievable amount of money off of that.
And and volleyball used to be what I would say 5-6 years ago.
Yep.
U of I men's golf has been and is now. So there is non-revenue sports that Whitman can hang his hat on as well. And yeah, I think from an era standpoint, in terms of if you were to judge athletic directors, and a lot of fans do, simply by the coaches that they hire, Whitman's doing pretty well. I found it interesting, if we're getting into it, like one of the first things that was mentioned was this non-compete clause that they have with 7 of the coaches, which is Josh Whitman's reminder to the media to express this throughout the public, which is our job. Hey, I'm not getting run over on every contract negotiation I've ever done in my life. Like, I make them sign this. And I don't know if fans really even care if they get run over, if he gets run over, and Whitman and Underwood and Shauna get everything that they want, as long as Bielema, Underwood, and Shauna get everything that they want, as long as they're sticking around. And they've made the point that these non-competes make it very difficult for them to leave. I have done a 180. I told this to our boss, or my boss and your partner, Larry Smith. I've done a 180 on this. Eventually, I rolled my eyes at the non-compete, which was, yeah, but you didn't put anything in there that says, and what happens. Legally, there's a reason for that. And I think that they're trying to avoid, because that's the nuclear bomb. And Illinois would be in a very good position. They'd have to hire a new coach. But if like, say, Brett Bielema wants to coach in the Big Ten ever in his life, now he said he doesn't, but let's assume that like he tries to make that move, you then have to hire a new football coach. But guess what? It's very unlikely that place he wants to go to will have him either. So you've nuked that place, and you just got to go find a new head coach. They've made it very difficult for Josh Whitman's career to not end with Brett Bielema, Brad Underwood, and Shauna Green being in those positions. And that's, if you're looking at it from strictly a fan's perspective, if I don't care about money, I just want my teams to be really good, then he's probably doing the right thing.
Yeah, and I got to be honest with you, I don't care about money. I just want the teams to be good. Yeah. So my way of looking at it is go ahead and try to figure out what direction you want to go in terms of that, because to me, that's the real positive, that you get that going well. And that's just kind of where you want to be in terms of getting things going on, making sure that you get things rocking and rolling. And I just think that we need to have those things going. And it's so different than what we saw just a few years ago when you can pick your coaches, particularly the Beckman-Gross combo was not good at all.
You had Beckman, Gross, and Nancy Fay. Like, that was a nice trio of Illinois is really not going to be competitive in anything until men's golf season starts in late spring. That's about what the timeline existed in. And yeah, I think Illinois is doing a really good job. I think, to your point, Mike, I think that if there's anybody that recognizes how important the 2025 football season is, it's Josh Whitman, with a close second maybe being Brett Bielema. And they said so. Like they get how important it is to build on this momentum of 2024. And honestly, how much of a letdown it would be if another 5-7 were to happen in 2025, which I think is very unlikely. But one or two injuries, you never know, right? I always call it a 4-month journey for a reason, but they know they have to build on this. They know they're putting 75% of that rev share money into football for a reason. There's huge payback on that if they can get a successful 2025 season. I think do you have the right? I think if you're Josh Whitman, you sit in your office and you realize, I think what's going on in the Smith Center is solid. I think what's going on in Ubben is solid. I think what's going on on the east and the west side now of Ubben is solid. And now I can focus my attention on other things. And that's always good for an athletic director to feel, is that, are we doing everything else correctly? Because I feel like the foundation for our revenue sports are as good as it can possibly be. Sports is weird, right? You can't really track everything that's going to happen, but I think he feels like his revenue sports are tracking in the right direction. And so now you focus on, like he said in the meeting, I think every power school, Mike, when they look at rev share, is going to have maybe 4 sports that get all of the rev share money, 4 or 5. And then the obvious examples are that obviously football, men's basketball, and women's basketball are going to be the 3 in pretty much in every department if you have football, right?
Yep.
So now it's about the 4th. And at Illinois, I think they're trying to figure out the 4th. I think they'd like it to be volleyball. I think they've got to figure out how to get volleyball back. But if you're Josh Whitman, I think you're sitting in your office thinking about, how do we get volleyball back?
Yeah, that's a tough question, because the facility, the one thing Illinois has done fantastic work on, and you can decide this is because Josh Whitman has prophet-like abilities.
Okay.
You could say he's lucky or somewhere in between. But Illinois had almost near perfect timing getting the Smith Center, getting Ubben, and now Adkins all set up and ready to go. Most of that work done we need money for NIL.
Yeah,
And so that is huge.
The one thing I would say about Atkins is they took it over during COVID.
Right.
So I don't know how much luck that was. I think that was good management, as much as you can.
Exactly.
I think they look back at that and are thanking their stars that they didn't lose buku dollars taking over Atkins like they did. But their plan was good for that. My point being is that it's nice to sit in your office and try to figure out volleyball and softball instead of trying to figure out your football program. Trying to figure out where that's going, trying to figure out men's basketball and where that's going, trying to figure out for the, I don't know, however many first 5-6 years that Whitman was the athletic director, why is everybody talked about Illinois football as a sleeping giant, and Whitman would remind everybody, no, like I have yet to figure out why women's basketball can't be at least almost as successful as our men's program has historically. It's never been. It's always been the sleeping giant at Illinois. I think he spent a lot of time trying to figure out women's basketball at Illinois. He doesn't have to do that anymore because Shauna Green is really good at her job. And quite frankly, Calamity McIntyre is really good at her job. And Shauna doesn't have to hire a whole lot of coaches because they don't leave Shauna. And there's a reason for that. And Brett Bielema doesn't have to hire a whole lot of coaches because they don't leave Brett Bielema. There's a reason for that. And I think he likes where his 3 revenue sports are. And then at Illinois, it's trying to figure out that 4th. How do we figure out how to make this 5% of our revenue probably in this 4th or 5th, in these 4th and 5th sports competitive at the power conference level? It's a nice problem for Josh Whitman to have right now, because I think he has said in the meeting, I ride with the guy at the Smith Center, and I have 100% confidence in what he's doing over there. And I think the same sentiment could be said for what's going on at Ubben on both sides, the left and the right side, meaning men's and women's basketball. I think he feels the exact same way.
And I think the interesting thing about that is, when you take a look at anybody, when you hire, I wrote a book on it for Novartis, and it's, as much as you try to make it a science, there's an art component to it. And what I like about it is, while he wasn't successful his first run at football and women's basketball, he learned. and he brought in and made improvements, and not just his predecessor who would just hire the opposite of whatever he didn't like about the guy who was there first. Oh, I need somebody who's loyal, so I'm going to hire Bruce Weber and ignore all the other things because we know he's loyal. I thought Whitman has done a good job of strategically saying, okay, we tried this. Now this is what I've learned we need. Let's go over and do that. And I think that has been impressive because I've seen people who get on hiring streaks where they lose their job because they can't hire people. And so he's proven that. And then I think the one thing that I will say that I probably disagreed with before I became founding and working with Illini guys, I believe the school is a huge part of it, which it can be. But I will tell you the force of nature of certain coaches at the college level is requisite. You get guys like Urban Meyer, who wins everywhere, Nick Saban wins everywhere, Brad Underwood wins everywhere. You get these guys, and then you get the guys like Bielema, who, has won it 2 out of the 3 jobs he's been at. And even Arkansas, as rough as things might have went, they haven't done as well since he left. And so you look at it though, but you got to hire the right guy or gal. I don't really care what sex they are. Look at what Mike Small's done with the golf program.
Right.
You get this guy and you put him in the middle of the North in a place that shouldn't be able to compete nationally, and he turns Illinois into a perennial winner. And I think it's a force of those leaders. And I think Josh maybe started to maybe hone in on what he felt was the most important factors for success. And I think he got the right people. And now I would expect if he had to make a change in softball or volleyball, I'd feel pretty good about who he's going to hire next the way he's going right now.
Yeah, I would too. I think he made it very clear that he's committed to both of those coaches. Tyler Perry's got a long-term contract at softball, and I think they figure there's pieces in place. And honestly, I think the other thing about when you hire non-revenue coaches, Dan Hartlib over at baseball, like a Mike Small, Tyler Perry over at softball, they have 7 coaches on non-competes. The reason they do that is I think the main component for Josh Whitman is, are you a good person and are you going to stay compliant? Are you going to say NCAA, College Sports Commission compliant? And I think that for the most part, the non-revenue sports have done that. And I think that's a huge portion of the component for Josh Whitman in those sports. And not to say it's not for them, for the revenues, because I know that's a huge component as well. What I will tell you is that I've had a longtime Bielema guy, let's just say, who's on his staff, who sat down with me once and he just said, there are a lot of coaches that can win everywhere. And he admitted, hey, my boss can't win everywhere. He proved that. Like, he can't win big everywhere. He can win big in the Midwest. My boss knows he can win big in the Big Ten. He just knows he can. And that's why the Illinois job works. And if Brett feels that way, that makes the whole Big Ten non-compete make a whole lot of sense. Because you would think that Brett Bielema could go to an Iowa, or he could go to Nebraska, or he could go to a fill-in-the-blank Big Ten school, at Purdue, and do the exact same thing he's doing at Illinois right now. Because he just knows the landscape. He knows the fan base. He knows how to sell himself to that level to that kind of fan. And look, we're all red states or blue states at some point, and we're all a little bit of purple. But if you're not a little bit of that purple, Brett Bielema kind of has a little bit of a problem. But I think he can sell himself to a lot of places, but I think he can sell himself to the Midwest portion of the country very easily. And at least from a fan's perspective and from a big money's perspective. And that's what makes Brett Bielema successful. I'm curious as to, and we got a long way to go here, but I'm curious if Brett Bielema can transition himself when he gets to his 60s, when this contract is supposed to be over, or at least he's going to need a new one or figure out what to do, if he'll transition into this general manager of college football programs role. I don't know if that's the case, because I don't think Brett Bielema feels comfortable micromanaging a coach. Let's say a former boss used to do to him.
Exactly.
But I don't know he wouldn't, because I think he'd be really good at it. And I think he'd be really good at managing the football program while letting the other guy coach. And I'm not going to.
I think it's clear he can do that, because look at how he's developed Aaron Henry. Look at how he develops coordinators. You could even say Ryan Walters coming here. Had Missouri fans were like, "Oh, you guys can have him." And so
there's G5, there's group of 5 conferences that have already been sniffing around Barry Illini for head coaching positions. Let's not act like that's not going to happen. Yeah, I agree. I think that, but I also think Brett Bielema knows like what the recruiting strategies work for Illinois. And I don't know if Johnny coming in here after Brett Bielema is going to know that right off the hook, Though I think the one thing that Walters would tell you now is that he didn't realize how difficult it was going to be to recruit to Purdue than it was for that program, for that football program, for that area, for the athletic department, and everything he was asked to do.
And Brett warned him.
Brett Bielema knew how difficult it was going to be to recruit to Illinois. And
he warned him.
And look, man, he knew coming December 2020, look, the recruiting success is just not going to be there right away. And at Illinois, and he had to work his way around it, and he's done that. No, I think Josh Whitman made it very clear that his legacy, I think, as an athletic director will be allowing Brett Bielema, Brad Underwood, and Shauna Green to establish their legacy at Illinois and not have them jettison somewhere else. I think that's the first athletic administration in a long time at Illinois where that's been the goal. I always think there's always been this little bit of arrogance at Illinois that if that guy wants to take a quote-unquote better job, we'll just go hire the next dude. And that put Illinois that put Illinois in such a caveat position for over a decade, because you were searching for the next Bill Self, and you were searching for the next John Makovic, and you were searching for the next Teresa Grinch. And when they all left and everybody kind of looked around and went, oh, that's not the same person when you brought in the next person. And I think that Illinois, Josh Whitman said it in the sense of, Mike, I think you and I will both agree that in the last 4 or 5 years, college sports has had a lot of chaos. I like it. I tend to like the chaos a little bit more than other people. But Illinois has steered into trying to find consistency and trying to find continuity in a college athletics era that has been murked in chaos. Not a bad yang. If you're not a bad zig, if everybody's zigging, it's not a bad zag for Illinois to turn into the skid essentially and say, hey, we want to go into consistency. We want to have the same people. We believe in what they're doing. And the one thing also I'll say quickly, and I'll turn it back over to you, is that one of the things I've respected about Josh Whitman more than anything is that if you look at the 3 hires that he's made in the non-revenue sports, Brett, Brad, and Shauna, I think it would be accurate to suggest that Whitman also, I think too many athletic directors, and I totally believe this, make it seem like it's an election among the fan base. And okay, how do we win the press conference? By hiring this person. If he'd have done that with football, Brett Bielema would not have been the hire.
No, he would not have.
And if he did it with basketball, Brad Underwood's probably not the hire, because I think a lot of people in Illinois didn't think Brad Underwood was gettable at that time.
But I got to be honest with you, when he walked in the door, most Illinois fans were like 2 thumbs up.
No, it proved it, but they didn't even think he was on the ballot because they were so beaten down by the last decade that they didn't think they could get a Brad Underwood. And then in women's basketball, you're sitting there and you're going, God, I just hope we get somebody. And I don't think Shauna Green was on their radar, because Shauna Green doesn't do anything but go to the NCAA tournament at the group of 5 level. So why would she come here? And she can get a better job than this. So she might not even been on the ballot. And I think there were a lot of other, let's just say, local people that might have been on the radar a little bit more that wouldn't have been as good. And Josh Whitman has been very, specifically with the football hire of Brett Bielema. I remember that night where, look, if I had a lot of people go, Matt, I don't know what you think you're doing reporting that, because I just don't think it's going to be Brett Bielema. And then we all woke up and Illinois was in State College, Pennsylvania, and Brett Bielema was shaking Josh Whitman's hand. And I thought there's a lot of people that were thinking it was going to go another way. And the reason they thought that was, oh, God, don't hire this retread who just got fired at Arkansas, and he's an arrogant, you know what, and like doesn't really appeal to us. And this is just another retread kind of thing of hoping to make a splash. And I think that Josh Whitman saw something different. And
I totally agree with that.
And I think that, again, if he'd used the election of, oh my God, I want to go win the press conference, I don't think Brett Bielema was your choice. And I think that Josh Whitman's always been, and I've respected this the most about him, he understands the fan base doesn't get to go to a firehouse and elect the football coach or the basketball coach or the baseball coach. That's not how this works, folks. Like, I'm making this decision because I think it's what's best for you. It's the broccoli decision. I need you guys to eat this program needs to eat some broccoli before we enjoy dessert. And I respected the hell out of the Brett Bielema hire because I thought it brought Illinois back to its roots, which was we're going to play Big Ten football, no matter what the conference decides to do expansion-wise. We're going to play Big Ten football, and we're going to have somebody that knows how to manage a Big Ten football program. And like I said, that longtime Bielema guy who's on his staff told me, I don't know if Brett Bielema would work everywhere in the country, but I know he works here because I've seen it work in places like this. And I tend to agree with him. And I think that also you got the sense from the 4 hours with Josh Whitman that we had on Thursday. I shouldn't be admitting to you this, my boss, Mike Cagley, but I missed the first 20 minutes and I felt really bad about it. And then I realized we had 3 hours and 30 minutes left to go. And I didn't feel so bad. But he made it very clear that his relationship with those three coaches, specifically Brett, Brad, and Shauna, are integral in why Illinois is having success in all three of those sports. His ability to not micromanage, but also give every kind of support that he can and help that he can to those three individuals, it magnifies what they can do in their offices and on the practice floor and in games. And I give Josh Whitman a lot of credit for that because he's even in this budget crunch that they're showing, and you can talk maybe more about this from a business standpoint. He has been able to give them as much support as he possibly could, and knowing that it will pay off for him big time. And I think that it has.
Yeah, I think one of the key things, and I don't think people really understand this. You think about in times of change at work, company comes out with a new program you're supposed to use when you deal with customers, or they change something. People are like, and if they have the opportunity to stick with the old program, they will. And so change is hard. And what I see Whitman doing is leaning into the change, saying, you know what? And I think he's astute about how he's chosen to do this, but he knows that most Illinois fans, and I would assume people inside the DIA don't like the status quo, that Illinois stinks and
Right.
Illinois has been on the bottom. So he's leaned into change and said, we're going to take advantage of this disruption and we're going to move up the charts. Meanwhile, some of the people above us are going to be grousing about how the good old days were the way it should have stayed, et cetera. And while these people are ruminating on the past, he's looking at the future. And I think that's probably one of the key things. And if you're in any type of management job, the people who win in management and the companies that win are the ones that, while it's high change and it's stress and it's a lot of work, they embrace it and figure out how they're going to move forward. And they don't waste a lot of time worried about what the past used to be, because as Coach Dick has said, the past is for cowards and losers. So I think that is a smart thing. And that's a little preview from tomorrow's Heat Checks and Hail Marys coming out at IlliniGuys.com.
Cool.
But I think that's really a key. And then I think the other thing that people can really, they should probably pat Josh on the back for is they are winning on the field now, whether it's football, men's basketball, golf, women's basketball. And when you're winning on the field, that means your ticket sales are up. That means you're going to have that revenue that's so darn important to be successful. And when you look at it, if you would have told me that the football season tickets would sell out, over 43,000 season tickets have sold out. Come on, that you got to go back to 30 years.
Mike, it's funny you mentioned that because that was one of the things that Whitman mentioned off the top of the bat was football ticket sales and the historic nature of selling out season tickets months before the season starts. I've been at other places where I haven't even written that in my newspaper notebook. When Auburn puts out the release every year that our season tickets have sold out, or Mississippi State puts it out that our season tickets have sold out, or quite frankly, when Illinois basketball or Purdue basketball, when I've covered them, puts out that our season tickets have sold out, I'm like, yeah, okay, cool. Yep. Those press releases, I always call them of, hey, there's no problem here, like press release, because quite frankly, if that had not happened, there would be a huge problem. But at Illinois, I admit, I hold my hand up and go, I have severely underestimated what that has meant to not only the hype surrounding this 2025 season, but just the importance of, when I was a kid in the early 90s, they would sell out with Makovic, but it would be right up the day of the game. They weren't selling out season tickets. They still weren't even selling out season tickets. It's why I've called, like, I've said it, but like the passive aggressiveness toward football in terms of season ticket sales has always been there my whole life. But he mentioned the season ticket sales numbers as a huge indicator as to what's going in the Smith Center and what's going on in that football program under Brett Bielema. I admittedly have underestimated it because I've always been places where it's been a no duh. You know what? I admit it. At Illinois, it's not a no duh, and I underestimated it because I think it is a huge, big deal. And I think that's also another reason why they know that 2025 is such a critical season on the field. Because if they can continue to get this momentum to where 2026 season tickets are sold out, and you just you create this momentum of which fans are now budgeting their money come spring to buy those season ticket allotments we know in April we're going to have to spend this to buy our season tickets. That's going to be part of our family budget. That's not huge thing in this economy. And if Illinois can figure out a way to do that, then I think that's a huge reason why football programs turn on a dime. And it's got the potential to happening here in Champaign-Urbana, and that's a major reason why.
And again, I look at it, that opens up the revenue, that creates the fund. The basketball program, again, people want to take that for granted, but John Gross ran that thing down, and Brad Underwood had to deal with 2 years of caca to turn it around. And you could take a look at Underwood's year by year performance, and you can see how rough it was. Because it's only 2 years of his career he's ever had rough years, even remotely rough years. It turned that around, and now the basketball program is over there cranking out like people expect Illinois basketball to do. And you put that with the football program. Again, it's hard. Look, folks, if I had problem, and people who know me, been around me for a while, they know that, like, my dad and I hate to be like Bill Simmons here. He talks about his discussions with his dad, but my dad and I, we couldn't talk about Bruce Weber because the day he was announced as coach, I was depressed because I knew there was no way Bruce Weber could recruit at the level necessary to be successful. And I was the only person. I'm telling you that when D Brown, when he would his senior year, when he went pro the year after the 2005, so it'd be 2006, I was posting on boards at the time that you needed to let Bruce Weber go. And at that time, he had a 88% winning percentage or some ungodly percentage. And everybody said I was nuts. So I will tell you when I think things are bad. Right now, I feel like we are back in the era of and I'm going to go back to about 1984 because you were coming off that.
You're coming
off. Yep. Yeah. Thank you. Great. Nice, Matt. So
no problem.
Yeah, no pay for you this week.
Again, folks, when you can be over 40 years old and be the youngest person on your staff, it's so cool. Really everywhere cool. Else in the world, you feel old, and then you come on and you talk to your colleagues and your bosses, and you feel like you're 25 years old. So
I need Grecian formula.
Go ahead.
I just shave this off, but like 1983, you had the incredible Rose Bowl season.
Mm-hmm.
Then you had the 83-84 basketball season that was so incredible. You went through a 5-year period there. And I'm not saying, I don't know that Mike White had the discipline that Brett Bielema does. We're going to find out. But that was a 5-year period. Yeah. That was a 5-year period that it was fun to watch. And I suspect that the football team will be better the next 5 years than they were from 85 to 89. Now,
so it's a hell of a debate because I think Brett Bielema wins it because I think he's made less appearances at CAMs than Mike White did. But I think that's the tiebreaker because they both won a decent amount.
That's what I'm saying. Yeah.
But I do think, to your point, Mike, if we codify this whole part, I think the non-competes allow Whitman to believe that the legacy of Brett Bielema will be better than the legacy of Mike White. Because the Mike White era did not end very well It ended in shame. It ended in scandal. It ended in 3-7. And I think that by doing what they've done with Brett Bielema's contract, Josh Whitman is almost intentionally trying to set Brett Bielema up for that to not happen. And I think it's really good. I agree with you. I think one of the interesting things, again, just to codify this point, is that Josh understood what he had taken over in terms of football and women's basketball. And I think one of the great, maybe like barstool debates will be which program was in a bigger ditch, in bigger trouble when that Brett or Shauna took it over. Who had a bigger climb out of the ditch? I would argue that Shauna had a bigger climb out of the ditch, but it ain't by much. It ain't by much. And for Brett Bielema and Shauna to dig this program back to like level ground and even footing is really impressive. And it's interesting to see that now that they're on level footing with a lot of other Power 5 programs in terms of how they're going about player acquisition, how they're going about facilities, how they're going about selling themselves. It'll be interesting to see where this goes from now. And I think that's why Josh Whitman wants long-term contracts with those people. Because, again, Illinois is steering into continuity in an era of chaos. But that was the main part of what they were trying to present, which was we're going to be steady Eddie in this world of chaos. And I think that appeals to the older Illini fan. But they also know that they have some things that they have to do to make sure that those people are not going to be there all the time. They have to appeal to a new generation of Illini fans. And I think Whitman – starting to put people in place in order to do that as well.
Yeah, like I said, I just go back as we look at things, we look at the state of the nation, and I see if you would tell me, you would tell me that the Illini were going to bring in 190 million of revenue, I would tell you that it's time to get a drug test.
Yeah,
seriously. And folks, you probably, again, the business side of this, but bringing in that type of revenue from Illinois, that has to be something that has to be like a key for the guys in Ann Arbor and Columbus. Now, that's not threatening their numbers, but they don't want to see Illinois starting to ramp it up. And they have to be looking at that going, I don't like that. Don't like that at all. And then when you see competent coaches in those key roles and an athletic director who's putting the pieces together, again, Michigan, Ohio State, they're not afraid of Illinois.
No.
But they don't like what they're seeing.
No, I think that who does like what they're seeing is the network partners. They like CBS likes Illinois.
Illinois is a power when it comes to ratings because there's some big markets and they're the one story that Americans love. The underdog. Because Illinois hasn't won big for generations. So when you're wanting to see that happen, just like the Cubs, just the Red Sox.
But also, if you're NBC, if you're CBS, if you're Fox, you want that market base. And everybody wrongly assumes that everybody in Illinois lives in Chicago, including some people that live at 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue. And that's not true. But the people that Illinois does do really good ratings because they do have alumni in a lot of major markets, and they would like for Illinois to be good. Now, I also think everybody in the Biefeld building realized that if we continue this malaise, the Big Ten's going to wonder why we're even here. And I think there are a lot of schools that look at 10 years down the road and go, is our conference going to eat us instead of us getting more money because our conference is expanding? And I think Illinois had that fear for a while, and I think they did something about it. And the way you do something about it, I've said this before, like whether it's Major League Baseball that doesn't have a salary cap or a salary cap professional sport like the NFL or the NHL or even the NBA with their first and second aprons, you want to know how you make a lot of money as a franchise? Win a lot of games and go to the playoffs. Yeah. That's how you make money. Why do the Dodgers make all this money? Because they go to the playoffs every year. You know what I mean? And so that's why this happens. And Illinois kind of figured out if we can figure out this football thing, if we can figure out this men's basketball thing, and then to a very smaller degree, if we can figure out this women's basketball thing, we're going to be all right. And we're also going to be very attractive to our network partners who give us a lot of money and make it a solid investment there. What I will say about this Whitman thing as we transition is I've covered 4 of these. And I told you this off the air, Mike. I felt like the first 3 were more informative and the last one was an infomercial. This one was an infomercial because I think Whitman had a lot to sell. I don't particularly enjoy being the other side of the table that he's trying to sell, but I think he felt like he had a lot to sell instead of he had a lot to inform.
I think some of that, though, Matt, comes
Go ahead.
down from the fact that the things are better now. When he was telling us about the debt a few
Yes.
years back, that was some scary stuff. Most people don't really follow those type of things, but
Right.
that debt information is somebody who's run multiple businesses or have to run 70 sales reps and their teams.
Sure.
You're looking at that revenue going, oh my gosh, how am I going to pay for this? How am I going to manage to do this? Am I going to be losing assets to generate the revenue because things aren't happening?
Sure.
And I'll tell you, where Illinois was when we first started versus now, I wouldn't have thought they could have done it this quick.
No.
I call it like I see it, but man, they've had it just goes to show you how important football is to everything. Because once football started to crank a little bit,
Yeah.
you start being able to pay your bills. You can see
and
why Ohio State and Alabama put so much money and resources into those teams.
I apologize. I need to be more specific. I don't find that to be selling. I find that to be like, here's what our numbers are. Here's where we sit. Telling us that they're a year early and paying off the university on what they borrowed during COVID, that's not selling to us. That's saying, hey, we're doing really well, and here's an example of how we're doing really well. Like, that's not selling. Selling to me is, Mike, and you and I both go on the boards pretty consistently. The first selling was whatever you want to call it, the ERA program, which is the ticket renewal program, the seat license program. They're selling that. They're selling that hard because they know it didn't go over well. I believe.
But it never does. I'm old enough to be here. I had to listen to people in the 1980s talk about Mike White comes in. Well, I was here during Bob Blackman era, and I shouldn't have to pay any more money. And as a young kid, I'd be like, you could, if you want Bob Blackman back, have at it, dude. I'll pay more money so I can watch Mike White's teams.
And I think that's Illinois trying to balance the fan base that's probably like in your dad's age group with fan bases that are in like maybe mine or even younger than mine age group. Like the ERA program went really well with 25 to 45s. Like it didn't go well for anybody else. And
it never goes well for the white hairs.
But who has time to really complain about it more? Like the people that are in the older bracket.
And they've got more money, so they've got more of a chain to be heard.
Right. And so they have been selling because they also know, Mike, that it's coming for basketball right now. And they know that, oh boy, if we don't get the same seats for basketball that we've had in the past, Mike, our message boards light up every time somebody has a problem with that they didn't get their seat back that they had last year or for the last 30 years or whatever. They know it hasn't been going great. I don't fault them for it, but that was a major sell early was, hey, we think that our ERA program is going great. And I'm like,
you remember
I was like, hey, Josh, I wish I could print out and show you all the threads that we have on the IlliniGuys message board that says otherwise, because I don't really know what to believe anymore.
I remember some of the big games with Iowa with Luka Garza.
Oh, yeah.
And I remember I got tickets from a buddy of mine, so I'm sitting really low. And an older woman is, please sit down. And it's like the whole place is standing up because the game was like a Rocky Balboa fight. And I remember her telling her husband, she goes, it's just so loud in here. I don't like it anymore.
Right.
And that's because we're winning.
Right.
She happened to be about 80, and she's probably went to games for 50 years. But I remember the same thing back in the 80s when we were going there and you had Ephraim Winters and Bruce Douglas and Derek Harper. I'm even talking pre-Flying Illini. It was the same thing when they started to do that. And unfortunately, I think that is as inevitable as I get older, every time I get up in the morning, I'm surprised that I've managed to somehow throw my back out during the art of sleeping. It's just something that happens as you age.
I would
so there's something to look forward to, Junior.
Trust me, my parents are still alive. I see it almost on a daily basis. And you're talking to somebody that's 41 who already has back problems. So I'm really looking forward to the senior citizenship. Trust me, physically. Anyway, no, they're trying to sell that. And then you got to remember also, which I found this to be interesting. The last two have been interesting in terms of these Whitman State of the Union addresses, because he's now the chairman of the Division I Council. Okay.
Yep.
And that's a national position. That means you have to be the voice of every Division I school and what we're trying to get accomplished here. So when Josh Whitman comes and talks to us, I almost see him as 50% the athletic director at Illinois and 50% this Division I chairman, council of the Division I chairman of the Division I council. Sorry. So I almost see him as like a national voice.
I think that's a fair thing because
No, I do.
he's got, and I have no doubt that the priorities are the Illinois job.
Oh, I'm not saying that.
But he does have to watch what he says because of his position. Every word he says is going to go out to everybody. So if he says that NIL Go stinks or whatever, everybody's going to hear that. And if he's supportive, they may not hear that as much, but it'll be out there as well.
And there it is, because there was a major sell to the, let's just call it 15 to 20 media people that were in that room in the Byfeld building, along with myself, on the College Sports Commission, NIL Go, and basically this new system that they're trying to get off the ground. I didn't feel like it was necessary because I feel like this thing hasn't been even, we're recording this like literally days before July 1st. So it technically hasn't even been in effect, but I think everybody's staked their camps.
He gave us the model for how it's supposed to be.
Work.
Now we will see what happens. As Mike Tyson used to say,
when you get hit,
everybody's got a plan until I hit him in the face. So the bottom line is now we're going to see how does reality match up with the plan. And Josh gave us what the plan was, and now we wait and see.
Yeah, I just feel like my concern, and if I was an Illini fan, this would be my concern, is that, and I know, Mike, that you're going to shake your head on this, up and down, is I really don't want the University of Illinois, for the sake of compliance, to put themselves in a competitive disadvantage, because that has happened before.
Oh, I totally agree.
And I have a concern with Whitman that Illinois is veering in the direction of putting themselves in a competitive disadvantage because they have to be compliant with NIL Go and the College Sports Commission. I am telling you that when I hear Josh Whitman try to sell me on how the enforcement is going to be different with the College Sports Commission than it has been with the NCAA, because of the people they're hiring, like these assistant director of U.S. attorneys and these private investigators and all that. And I understand all that.
That is intriguing, though.
It's intriguing, but Mike, I've covered enough enforcement. Like the guys that were working at the NCAA enforcement, they were retired police investigators, murder investigators. They were retired U.S. district attorney. Everybody that basically they were. And then from the last standpoint, they were all retired, but had extensive investigative chops on their resume. They just didn't have that job. The NCAA wasn't going to be able to hire them away. But their staffing was an issue. And then he basically said, and then we're going to hire these assistant district attorneys. I'm skeptical of, okay, yeah, you go ahead and you hire Robert Mueller, and then we'll see what happens. And because I know that person still doesn't have subpoena power, or those people still don't have subpoena power. So if you don't want to talk to them, you do not legally have to. And
here's what I don't understand. The one thing I don't get is, if you really wanted to put some teeth into any of this stuff, is why not go ahead and say, once you become an athlete, we get the opportunity, if we ask, to see your IRS, your taxes, and see your parents' taxes. That would get you pretty much an idea of who's receiving money, or at least it'd make people work a lot harder to cheat. But I've come to the conclusion that since the history of mankind, if there's a way to get money, fame, influence, or power, if you have to cheat a little to get it, you will. So there's no way you're going to stop the cheating.
No. And I'm not advocating that Whitman come up with a program that's going to. What I'm advocating for is that Whitman understand that I would prefer him to be a public advocate of, we at the Illinois are going to evaluate the system and see how we can best work within the system the best we possibly can. Because that leaves some gray area too. We're going to work in the gray a little bit. Like, I'm sorry, but we've got big money people that we are not going to say, hey, don't do this anymore. We're going to work in the gray.
Ohio State football and Duke basketball is not going to, for very long, they're not going to look at a 5-star defensive tackle or a 5-star point guard in Chicago and go, oh, shucky darns, we're out of dollars. Yeah. I guess they're going to University of Illinois.
Right.
It's just not going to happen. There's always going to be ways to get around the rules, and you're just going to have to figure out how to compete, because in America, it's, did you win? That's the first
Right.
question that's asked. It's never the other things.
Yeah.
And even if you cheat to win, people get all aghast about it for a day or two, and then it's over with, and you're still the winner.
What I found interesting, because he didn't give a good answer to this, Mike, and I specifically asked him this, which is, and I'll let you roll on this, but I asked him, I said, Mike, I'm sorry, Josh, if you had to sit down right now with a big money person who would be considered, according to these rules, a third-party entity, okay? And I didn't say this name, but let's just throw out a name. If you're sitting down across from Shad Khan and you are saying, here are the new rules, Shad, this is what are you literally going to have a conversation with Shad and say, we're not going to let you do this anymore? Every deal that you do with an athlete is going to have to be, whether it's over $600, is going to have to be put into this commission. It's going to be investigated. If it's red flagged, you're not going to be able to do it. Like, how does that conversation go so that they feel satisfied that they're making a contribution to Illinois that is going to be making Illinois competitive still? Because the system that we were living in, Mike, the Shad Khans of the world could have an impact. I can't imagine the Texas Tech AD having a conversation right now with Cody Campbell and going, my man, we love what you've done, but you can't do it anymore. Like, how does that conversation go? And his answer was, and you'll love this, you should donate that. We're going to try to lean that person back to donating to the I Fund.
It's
deductible. I was like, ding, ding, there it is, because –
it's tax deductible, so right. There's another 20%.
He made that.
Look, I will tell you though, that's a big point for people of those dollar amounts. That's a big deal. But I will say that my guess is across the country is there may be conversations that will be very vague, and they will be either on the phone or, even better yet, in person, where nothing can be recorded. And I don't think anybody's going to go into the nuts and bolts of this. I think everybody's going to see how it plays out before you, because the worst thing is, one of the things, if you're a sci-fi fan, you read the Dune books, one of the big things they talk about in Dune is once you have an express set of rules, then you have to enforce them and live by them. So if you don't have any rules, it's a lot easier to work. So I think we'll see some of this evolve.
Every time this happens, and even with Whitman, Illinois is more than willing to put themselves at a competitive disadvantage in the effort of compliance. And I wish that they wouldn't as much. And I've had that conversation with Whitman. I've had that conversation with a lot of other people at DIA. I feel like there's a way for Illinois to live in the gray. I don't want to hear the history arguments. I've heard them all. I get it. But there's a way for Illinois to live in the gray and still be highly competitive in a power conference. And I wish that they would skid more toward that. I feel like Whitman's leadership makes them skid toward compliance. And in the places I've been, Mike, when you skid toward compliance, guess what? That skids you toward more L's than it does W's.
We'll see.
No, I get you. But I think everybody's breaks off in their camp. But that was a major part of this how we're going to pay athletes and other things. From the informative side of it, I'm going to shut down this computer afterwards, because we're now going to talk about the Missouri series, because I thought when he brought it up, I was like, oh, God, he's going to cancel the thing. And it's going to just be an absolute, like, kumbaya, hallelujah field day on our message boards. Nope, we're getting rid of 2 of the 8 games, because Bielema doesngoing to play 11 power conference games.
I got to be honest with you.
I don't disagree.
I don't disagree either. Although I will say it's going to be a nice revenue shot.
I agree.
But it's such a high risk that if you cut off 2 of them, that's great. And if you wait another year and cut 2 more off, I can live with that. And if we keep shaving off the last one and the first one, we may never get to it.
I feel like what Whitman and the new AD who came from Memphis at Missouri, I think that they've both looked at each other and said, let's do this when we're the only Power 5 non-league game on our schedule. Let's make that happen. And I don't disagree. I also think they've done it in a really smart way, because everybody freaked out. I admit fault on this, because when I initially reported it on social media and on our site, it looks like it's now 4 Missouri home games and 2 Illinois home games. No, it's going to, at the very least, it's going to be 3 and 3. I'll write about this later on this weekend on IlliniGuys.com, detailing what the plan is. When I talked to people inside the Byfield building after it was all over, it looks like it's going to be 2, 2, and 2.
Okay.
which means 2 home games. I don't know the years because there's a little break in between the first 3. It's going to be 2 3-game series essentially because I think there's like a 3 or 4 year break between the first 3 games and the second 3 games. But it's going to be 1 in Champaign, 1 in Columbia, and 1 neutral site. Now, I think what ends up happening there is I think there's a motivation to do the neutral site. I think that it's not necessarily an automatic slam dunk that neutral site is going to be in St. Louis for 2 reasons. One, I think that Illinois gets what they need out of the bragging rights basketball game in St. Louis. And I think that they don't necessarily need to do St. Louis every time we do a neutral site with Missouri. I also think that because we're so far out in advance, with the first game being 27 in Columbia, that would mean like the neutral site game could be 29. We're so far out in advance there. We could go to a different venue. I have heard, but then until we get an indication of when the Bears are going to build this stadium and where they're going to build it, let's assume it's still going to be at Soldier Field. If you do Soldier Field, you still have to deal with the Chicago Park and Rec system because they technically own Soldier Field. That can be a pain in the butt, but I don't think that it would impact like the Bears. It just might impact Chicago Park and Rec schedule. Like you got to work around that. So there's a reason why Illinois, I think in the last 30 years have played 2 games at Soldier Field. Let's just be real about it. But that's a possibility. I also think from the Missouri side, Arrowhead is a possibility in Kansas City.
Oh, sweet.
Simply because, and this is the opposite side, which is I don't think Missouri was all that thrilled about Kansas playing some of its home games last year in Arrowhead while they were redoing their stadium.
So I give Missouri a little bit.
So I think Missouri would like to take a bite out of that marketplace again, and doing like those doing a neutral site game in Kansas City would do that, and being able to put it on like ABC, and that would be a big deal for them. So that's where I think that's going to go. I am in favor of the Missouri series. I think that pretty much every power conference opponent plays 1 every year. I'm not against playing 2, but I get the reason why you don't want to. But I don't think – I get the argument of next year we don't want to play Duke and Missouri. I would like to see Illinois get to a place in which they're not afraid to play Duke and Missouri at home. You know what I mean? That seems a little bit – if you win 20 games over the next 2 years and then you've said, I don't want to do this. I would also tell you, though, that's not just Illinois trying to weasel out of things. Missouri has also been in connotation of, hey, we only want to play 1, 2.
Exactly.
And that makes sense because Missouri ends up they're trying to do this deal with Kansas because they're not in the same conference anymore, and they'd like to play football with Kansas and work that around and all that. That was newsworthy. There wasn't a whole lot of other news. Illinois finally took my advice for the last 5 years, which is when and if she was ever done playing basketball, making Kendall Bostic some sort of public information officer or media relations person or media relations person inside or media relations personnel person inside your athletic department. And she's going to do the alumni job that Kevin Mitchell did for a long time and has left about a few months ago. She's been hired full-time by DIA, which I thought was I've been campaigning for that because I've said before that if you were a Fortune 500 company and you needed somebody to do public relations, Kendall Bostic would be the person you hire.
And maybe you can trick her into doing some basketball coaching because she might have a future there too.
Yeah, I also think she's going to make one hell of a teacher, but I also think that she looked at teaching salaries across America and went, for the next first few years of my life, I'll take this salary with a potential government, working up to a government pension at the University of Illinois and set myself up. It's a really awesome move for Illinois. It's an awesome move for Kendall. Her dad does this for Purdue, believe it or not. Kevin does this at Purdue. He doesn't broadcast it, but he does it on the academic side at Purdue, and I think she's going to get a kick out of it. I think she's going to be really good at it. They did the classic Illinois thing, Mike, which was, we're not going to tell you. You've seen in terms of the rev share, you've seen how everybody's like the 75, 15, 5 and 5 for your 4 big money sports. Illinois is not going to get all the way to that for those percentages, and they're not going to tell us.
No, nobody's going to. It's going to be a secret recipe. It's like the Colonel's Kentucky Fried Chicken.
But it's not going to be that different.
I'm with you.
I mean, I'm quoting Whitman. I'm not saying I had to go get that. Whitman's, I'm not going to tell you exactly what the percentages are, but it's not going to be that far off.
Yeah.
It sounds like football, men's basketball, women's basketball, and volleyball are going to be those 4 at Illinois. And that makes sense. That makes all the sense in the world. And so that was informative. Anything else like that you saw? Because
I think we've hit
our summaries of.
Yeah, I think we've hit everything, and we're up at against the hour mark here. So I think, folks, we will end it with that. Matt's given us pretty good, incisive some of the news. We tried to talk a little bit about the higher points and more of our thoughts. We've both sat through these for quite a few years now, and it's a lot of fun. I'm glad Josh does that. And again, you get a chance to kind of see where this program's going, and it's in a lot better place. I think there's a couple big things going on. One is Josh is hitting his stride, and the second was IlliniGuys started in 2021. You see where everything has come since we started. I think that's probably the key metric in all this that Josh forgets to talk about, Matt.
3 quick points before we head out, Mike, that just popped into my head. I'll get them real quick. December 22nd is the bragging rights game. They made that date official. That will be, I think it's probably going to be, they like the afternoon deal. I tend to agree. I think that it becomes a travel pain in the rear for a lot of the fans to try to get there like on the 29th at night. TV dictates that. Orange out will be the Ohio State game. The whole stadium will be in orange for the Ohio State game. I tend to think there might be a jersey thing for that. I think you might see orange jerseys. Not saying I know anything, but you might.
I'd like to see them do a Nike dry fit orange sweatshirt. They've got every year they have blue sweatshirts like that.
Okay.
So if we're going orange only, I'm hoping our friends at Nike decide to give Illinois a little bit of a boost and put out those nice $100 sweaters.
And last but not least, they talked a lot about the stadium renovations going on.
Wi-Fi is going to be
at Memorial Stadium. That's the thing I wanted to tell you. I think everything is going to be 2026 full information, except fans, your Wi-Fi is going to be better by the season opener. That will be done. The Wi-Fi in the corridor will be fully up to snuff by the season opener. The Wi-Fi in the entire stadium will be, I think, by the USC game, fully operational. So your Wi-Fi when you show up to Memorial Stadium is going to be a heck of a lot better than your experience that you've had over the last 3-4 years.
That is going to be fantastic.
Yep.
So, folks, if you've enjoyed this, IlliniGuys.com, you can become a subscriber, $99 a year. You get some extras for that. Main thing being the ability to talk to Matt, Brad, Ked, Larry, myself on the message boards or DM direct messages if you want to. We're on the boards a lot, so you get that one-on-one stuff. It's not a passive, just listen to us. You can actually go, why did you say this? What did you mean by that? And so that is a huge advantage if you want to know about Illinois sports. We look at the subscribers as our Patreons, and that gives us the opportunity then to give those extra features. And it also gives us the opportunity to go ahead and with your dollars, that's what we use to send Matt, Brad, Ked, or myself out to different events so that we can cover them. It is the one negative about the bigger Big Ten is the cost for flights out to the left coast is expensive, hotels, etc. You can't just drive like you can to just about any of the Big Ten Midwest schools and make it home that night if you feel like taking a long day. That's what we use your dollars for. So we'd love to have more people join in. And of course, subscribe on our IlliniGuys.com YouTube channel. And also subscribe if you see us down below on Twitter. You can go ahead and at Mike Cagley, at Matthew C. Stevens. Follow us for Illini news, notes, etc. And I think that will be it for this one. Until next time, folks, go Illini.